That's right. Hello, everybody. Welcome. It's good to see some of y'all here. I just got done. So first of all, if you don't know me, my name is Colin Campbell. I lead the Sales Hacker team. So nice to meet you. If you haven't been here before, if you're a regular, welcome back. It's good to see you again. I just got to spend some time over the last few weeks with a lot of you in person, which was really exciting. We were in Boston, in New York, in Chicago, San Francisco, and London. We got some really awesome sales hackers together, and we talked about, what it means to be a sales rep now versus 20 years ago. And then we were talking about how, if you're a sales leader right now, you might not know what it's like to be a sales rep. And so we had a great mix of attendees. At one table I sat at, there were 5 CROs and an AE. And the 5 CROs were peppering this AE with all kinds of questions. What is it like? What do you think we should do better for our teams? It was really cool. So here's my ask of you. If you're joining us today and you think that's interesting, can you DM me on LinkedIn and let me know what cities we should go to next? So find me on LinkedIn. My name is Colin Campbell, if you didn't hear it. Let me know, where should we take our next Sales Hacker Roadshows community meetups? We've got a really cool topic today. Really cool. So we're talking about ABM, but that's kind of just a front in a way to deliver to you all a lesson in change management. So we're going to get into some really, really interesting lessons about both, where are the sticking points in ABM adoption and initiatives? Why does it feel like sometimes ABM that's meant to drive alignment between marketing and sales doesn't pay off? Like, what are the sticking points, and what are the secrets to doing it right? But there are lessons about change management that you can take and apply to all kinds of other initiatives that you roll out. So I am really, really excited. Before we get into that, I have a couple of quick housekeeping items. So later, we'll post in the chat. We're going to have a follow-up discussion from today's live conversation on the Sales Hacker Forum. So keep an eye out for that link in the chat. If you want to continue the discussion later today, you can do that there, and I'll remind you later. We also have a new question on the Sales Hacker Forum today from Brett Goodwin. They're looking for help on how to prep for an upcoming meeting with a new prospect or company. I left my thoughts, but I haven't been in sales for a while. So if you have thoughts on that, you want to help Brett out, please do. That's what we're all about here at Sales Hacker, helping one another. So check out that new conversation in the forum. The last thing is I want to plug, if you haven't checked it out recently and you like the topic of this conversation today, I haven't plugged it in a while. The Revenue Innovators podcast is pretty amazing. It's hosted by Mary Shea and Harish Mohan, and they talk to some pretty fascinating guests. The Chief Measurement Officer at Google, or Chief Measurement Strategist at Google. They talked to Director of Revenue Planning and Operations at LeafLink, which is a cannabis company. All kinds of kind of off-the-wall guests who you might not expect on like a normal kind of revenue leader podcast. So they're getting creative with it. Check it out, Revenue Innovators podcast. All right, we're gonna get into it. So we're talking ABM and change management today. To help us do that, we have Tennille Miller. She leads change management and business transformation practice at Outreach. So Tennille, welcome. Thanks for being here. And Uzair, I realized that I should have asked you how to pronounce your last name before we went live. I'm going to take a stab at it. So if I embarrass myself, I'm sorry. Uzair Dada.
It's perfect.
Did I do it?
Perfect.
Yeah, great.
Perfect.
CEO at Iron Horse, which is a revenue agency that focuses, among other things, on helping its clients transform business, become more aligned across sales and marketing, and doing so through ABM. So we have a lot to talk about today. What I want to do is honor your time. If you're watching this live, if you're here with us today, please say hello in the chat. I see a couple of you already doing so. That's awesome. You're here today to participate and take part, to connect, to meet one another. And we really take it seriously that you took the time to give us an hour of your Tuesday. So I want to ask you to give yourself the gift of being present. Close your Slack and your email, spend the time with us today, and you'll get more out of the conversation. And you can butt in and ask questions or add your 2 cents at any time. We welcome it. So welcome. I see a lot of y'all saying hi. Beautiful. To get things started, Uzair, can I ask you to help us set the stage on, what we're talking about today?
Yeah, totally. And I'm gonna share a few slides that I think will set the stage, but we really want this to be a conversation today, and hopefully it'll make sense. So, when we started chatting about this, we help a lot of enterprise companies, emerging growth companies, kind of help drive growth. And ABM seems to be kind of an interesting thing that is sort of a kind of a joint initiative between marketing and sales, or so it should be. And so we sort of thought, hey, how do we kind of think about things that we rightly should be collaborating on, but often don't, or we perceived to be collaborating, but it actually really doesn't work. And so how do we talk about that as a topic? Sometimes it's taboo, and we wanted to sort of make it a little untaboo. And so, that was the whole goal was, can we use an interesting example that we're all familiar with, hopefully most of us are familiar with, and talk through some things. And doing so, the notion was, can we talk about some examples of the new world we live in, the new era we live in, and start sort of forming a conversation. And we really encourage you guys to participate, because we don't want this to be a one-way conversation. And I'd love the turn your phones off, turn your other things off. I already feel at peace here, Colin, by sort of the Zen moment you set us up on. So this is super cool.
Do my best.
The conversation, I think an interesting one that I have been having a lot with people today is the world we live in has evolved and changed over the last 2.5 years. Even pre-COVID, we were seeing this, but it's sort of accelerated. So what does that mean? If you look at the buyers today, they've evolved how they buy and what they do to get there. The number of people involved that we all need to influence, especially on the B2B sales side and B2B marketing side, has grown from what used to be 3-4 people in the whole concept of this buying team, and we were selling to companies and not to a person, to now the latest data that came in from Gartner, I think a few months ago, was 11 on average on enterprise deals.
And I saw data that can flex up to 20.
Crazy, yes. For government type deals, it was like nuts. Like 25 or something was another example I saw somewhere. It was like, oh my God, how am I supposed to do this? How am I supposed to even find these people out? Who are they? To me, they're all probably avatars like this, right? They sort of look like something that I have no idea who they are. So that's crazy. If you take on top of that, then how we research, how we evaluate, how we learn about things, how we discover things, how we evaluate and consider things. The number of touch points has gone in just the last 2 years up by 10, from 17, as if that was not high enough, to 27, right? Ridiculous. But interesting is, there still is a huge amount of human interaction involved, right? It may not happen on your domain, but it's happening. People are talking to people. People are learning from people. People are going to Sales Hacker and asking, hey, dude, I'm looking at XYZ tech. Have you guys used it? Right? As an example. So still happening. Both are important. Digital more important than physical. And then the last piece that I think is really important is where we seek information. And this to me is the most fascinating, right? Which is we are looking at all different channels. One of the recent conversations, I think it was at the Forrester Summit that I had with someone, they were saying, for certain established product categories, companies are spending less than 10% of their time with the brand. Imagine that. Imagine that if you're a sales guy. Imagine that if you're a marketer. What the hell do you do? Seriously, right? Like, we're so used to you come to my house and I host a party and we all sit down and chat. And you talk to my SDR, who sets up an AE meeting, who sets up an AE plus SE meeting, and I go through my band questions and I go through blah, 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 blah to get to the opportunity, and then I close the sale. Well, guess what? By the time I got to you, I'm ready for a demo and a conversation on pricing. In fact, I already know your pricing.
Yeah.
Right?
Say it again for the people in back. There's nothing more frustrating than, as a buyer, being ready to talk and having to do the qualification rigmarole.
There's nothing I despise more, really, as a buyer of SaaS technology. When I am ready, I'm ready to go, and I talk to someone and they said, oh, hold on. They rewinded me from stage 3 to stage 1. We've stopped listening. We've stopped understanding how things have changed, right? The world has changed. How we sell has not. We're still used to a linear process. We're still used to doing things our own way. I do this, marketing does this, marketing and sales don't inform each other. With all this crazy new tech that we have, right? That is allowing us to get these amazing intent signals, first party intent signals, third party intent signals that tell us what people are doing elsewhere before they come to us. But we tend to just ignore it as if it never happened. It's amazing, right? To me, it's like being a fly on the wall and you're listening to your prospect's conversation, but we seem to just ignore it. Right?
Even without all the data, right? If you think for a second about how you buy things, it often doesn't match the sales process that you're using or being asked to follow.
100%. But to me, one is I ignore stuff that's on the outside of my 4 walls. But we even ignore the stuff that's within our 4 walls in the room next door, which is marketing. Right? So they have all this awesome information. Yeah, perhaps it showed up in my SFDC instance, but am I listening to it? Do I know how to evaluate it? Do I know how to act on it? I don't know. I don't certainly act like I do, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's kind of a really interesting frame to think about, because almost everything we do today needs to morph to that standard, to that new normal that now exists. And I think if we are not doing that, we are all doing ourselves a disservice. And us in the technology space and technology sales and marketing space, we always talk about what we are selling, which makes sense. We sell a product, we sell a service that someone is buying, so we talk about that. But we often ignore what they are looking at and how they are looking at it. They're very insular, right? And so how do we sort of make sure that we have different lens, a wider lens of looking at that structure, right? And more openness to understanding information that, hey, they don't come to my .com website to learn about outreach. They've already talked to their buddies. They've already talked to peers who are using outreach. They may have talked to outreach customers. They may have looked at analyst reviews at Gartner, at G2, or Capterra, or whatever else. And so by the time they come to me, they already know outreach better than most of my people. How do I deal with that? And if we can sort of embrace that mentality, it is magic. It's awesome. So what we thought today we would do kind of as an example to talk about, as an initiative, as a strategy, is talk about account-based marketing. And Tanil and I and Colin want to sort of use that as an example, because I think it's truly a good example of collaborative. It's a good example of multi-channel and integrated. So we thought that would be kind of a cool way to think about it. And, you know, as we all know, ABM, by the way, as a label, I love the AB part of it. I hate the M part of it, because it's not account-based marketing. It's account-led growth, right? You're selling to a company which is made up of people. You're not selling to a person, right? So the notion of, in the old days, if you are a marketer or even a salesperson, a marketing qualified lead or MQL by itself, to me, is dead. If that's all you're relying on, as someone to come to your doorstep and raise their hand, you've lost 95% of the opportunity. So you have to be able to listen to the new normal of people are doing it elsewhere. You need to listen to what they're doing and then bring that into your sales process and marketing process to nurture to close. And the only way that happens is if there is alignment between sales and marketing is informing sales and sales is informing marketing. Thoughts?
That's
Sunil?
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, what do you say, Tennille?
Well, I guess you're touching on a really key principle of change management in this regard. And I would call that like co-creating, co-elevating, kind of that collaboration between teams and between organizations if necessary. And so my 5 cents or 2 cents to that is yes, I agree completely, but I think it's easier said than done, especially as we know if things have been done one way in the past and we're asking folks to do things a different way in the future. I think there's a lot of things that we'll touch on here to make that happen, right? Getting us from that current state to the future state, or what I would actually call the past state to the future state.
100%. One of my favorite examples for a large tech company that we know, they had a marketing and sales nurture at the same time. So marketing nurture probably had in 1 week 7 or 8 touches, ridiculous amount of touches. Okay. Same time, the zealous salesperson was sending same amount of sequenced emails and probably calling us multiple times, multiple people at the company, including inventive enough to get on our chatbot to get out and say, hey, can I talk to Uzair and Darren? And so kudos to you for being inventive, but the two things are not talking to each other. And it became super annoying. And all I was doing was learning about something earlier on. I had no interest in buying at that time. But there was no connection between the two sides.
We have a, oh, sorry, Uzair.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, we have Jeff, I'm going to mess up your last name, Jeff Skokie, I'm going to say, says he's thinking about how this internet connection between sales and marketing plays out in sales of professional services like brand consulting, experience design. Do you think there's a difference there when you're selling services versus when you're selling, say, like a software product or some other hard product?
You know, a bit. The intent part is not any different. The information is being seeked out elsewhere, and when they come to you, they sort of know about you. Naturally, the selling process for services is very different than products, and so you've got different stages involved. But even there today, if sales and marketing at services firms are not talking to each other, you have the same problem. And so I think the challenge is, and we see that for our growth agency, right? We see that when marketing is running an initiative and they haven't pulled in sales into the loop as to why they're doing and what they're doing, then the two people are disjointed. So we've tried a lot when every time there's a campaign and initiative launch happen, that marketing and sales sit down and look at the same set of KPIs. As an example, that helps a lot.
That's good. Yeah, having them kind of united under the same, whether it's the vision or whatever you want to call it, to understand like the benefits to each of them of partnering and, to your point, addressing those metrics. I think that's great.
Totally.
Yeah.
Tennille, I feel like I didn't do your role justice in the intro. And I only say that because I think it's a fascinating position. Would you mind explaining to our attendees here a bit about like what your experience is?
Yeah, I mean, so I spent most of my career before Outreach in a large consulting firms, professional services for the most part. And so lots of experience driving transformational change, as well as employee experience and all the strategic initiatives that leaders are trying to drive in their organizations. My role is actually to do that. So that can look a lot of different ways. It can be developing a robust change of communications plan to drive that, which again, that's more than an email. It's communications as one of the levers, right? It could be leadership coaching, all kinds of different activities, sort of like Uzair was touching on, that need to happen, which would be leadership alignment, right? When you're doing any change or trying to get folks to work together, the leaders need to be on board, first of all, and aligned under that common vision. And then you have to have that very compelling vision in the business case of like, why in the heck are we even doing this? And I'm not talking just from leaders' perspective. I'm talking that needs to also highlight the benefits and the why and the what's in it for me, the WIFMs, for the folks that we're asking to change their behavior as well. Because at the end of the day, the average person doesn't really care what their leader wants necessarily if they don't see how they fit into it and why they're doing it and how they'll be held accountable or how there'll be different other levers in the organization that will reinforce it. So all those things is really my work. I also was an executive coach for a little bit as well. And then now being at Outreach, I basically stood up the transformation practice, and we built a very robust change methodology so that when our consultants deliver projects to clients, we actually have embedded change management management within that implementation. And then I also internally serve as the client-facing transformation leader. So that means on all of our large enterprise clients or some other ones that are maybe doing an optimization, I come in and drive the change in communications activities for them. So hope that answered your question.
It does, and I'm glad. Thank you for describing that better than I could have, because I want to just briefly pause and talk about how we arrived at this topic. So Uzair and I were talking about putting together some kind of event for you all, for the sales hacker community. And Uzair is pumped up about not ABM, account-led growth. And then we started talking about why it sometimes doesn't work. And it's really because the true alignment is not there. And so we said, you know what? This is a missing business skill. It's change management. And so this is like an ABM, account-led growth case study of how to do change management. And so before we joined today, Tennille, you were telling me you've managed like 50 different transformation projects in the last like year or so.
Yeah.
So I can't think of anybody better to have included, because as soon as we started talking about change management, I said, we got to include Tennille. And so that brings me to Kimberly Foster. You asked a good question. Thank you, Kimberly. How do we educate CMOs about this? Many marketing leaders are still getting, targeted demand gen confused with ABM or ABX, and they want there to be a wall between marketing sources versus what sales sources. That wall needs to come down. Kimberly, I think I'll challenge you a little bit to reframe it, not as, how do we teach CMOs about this, but how, when there is misalignment, can you use a change management framework to generate alignment, regardless of who, because saying the marketing needs to catch up, frankly, a little blamey. It's okay, it might be true, but it won't, the advice for that situation won't fit every situation. So that brings me to Tennille. What do you say? How do you get to real alignment? Where does it start here?
There's a great question. And this is probably the number one question that we have from a change perspective in general, and any other client does as well. And that is, there's a lot of ways you can approach it. What I would say though, is that you need to figure out what are the common, and I'm going to use this word a lot. I don't know if any of you know of Keith Ferrazzi, but he's an amazing author. He's done some amazing research, and one of his most recent books is called Leading Without Authority. And he talks about this term that he basically invented called co-elevation. And I just love it, because it literally is, you need to figure out, regardless of which side you're on, regardless of what you're looking for, you need to figure out your team, right? The people. So in this case, if you're in sales, marketing is also your team, and vice versa, or whatever that is, and get those leaders and get those folks aligned around a common, broader, bigger vision that includes benefits to both yourself and your team, as well as that other team or that other leader. So you got to really think through, like, not what divides us, but actually what do we have in common? What are we working towards? That's the number one thing, because once you have that, and then that kind of feeds into what you're asking them to do, and you've connected those dots, you got to do a little bit of work up front, obviously, a little homework. But once you've connected those dots, then you can get those folks, it's compelling to them. They want to partner with you because you've already found out what's in it for them, what you guys need to do to partner, and that sort of thing. So I can tell you what this looks like on an outreach project or that sort of thing. But I think in regard to this, I'd love to hear you, Zaire, what do you think? I mean, in this regard to the account-based growth.
Well, the first thing that I would say, and you hit it on the head, and I actually see that even in our company, the term "my team." It's not your team. First of all, it's not your team. You all belong to an entity that is your team. It's not your team. So when people say my team as my sales team or my team as my marketing team, no, we are working on something together. In this case, the co-creation part of it is we're working on growth. And so that's the common element. The question is, who is best equipped to do that? And let's go make that happen. I think you have to get that alignment. And I think the question around CMOs, I think yes, I see where it's coming from, because historically, I'd say they're believers at the execution in IC level, but sometimes leaders still finger point a lot within larger organizations.
Oh, yes.
And so to me, if you are starting on an initiative and you're saying, if you're still talking about marketing versus sales, don't do an ABM initiative. It's not going to work. If you're still questioning does marketing drive leads for you in this day and age with this information, and you don't have that trust established, don't start this initiative. It's going to fail. You have to understand what it is that you're doing. You have to understand that this is a new way, a new approach, as Tennille is going to talk about, of doing things. And that is not a campaign, that is not an initiative. It is the way, as Mandalorian would say it, right? It's sort of, this is the way. And so I think that has to happen. You sort of have to embrace that. When you're going to sustain anything, you have to embrace that.
Can I play devil's advocate for a second? Because you're saying, if you're still talking about a divide between sales and marketing, don't try to tackle an account-based motion. What if I view the trying to tackle an account-based motion as the forcing function for us to, change our historical understanding of the relationship between sales and marketing?
I think that's totally cool. All I'm saying is, if you are one of those organizations that is toxic, which truly thinks of the other guys there to get me and they're useless, then it's going to be really hard. Then you can make incremental change, but I think from a alignment perspective, and I think we're going to talk about it then in a bit as more, is you really have to embrace the what and the how and the why for it to be sticky. If you're just giving it lip service, like, yeah, that's great, that sounds great, like we should do this because I heard it, checklist item, you're going to fail. So it needs to come from inside, right? It can't be superficial, because yes, you can get it further, but if you are, to me, it's amazing that in today's day and age, for large global enterprise companies, how that still exists is amazing. And there's, I'd say, we're publishing a growth survey that we just finished. I saw some earlier results, and it said like 75 or 80% of the organizations now have ABM as their core way of go-to-market of their growth strategies, right? It's not surprising if you look at how people are doing this, but it's true. If that's the case, but if you look at how many are doing it well, it's less than 10%. So they are trying to do, Colin, what you're saying. They're using that as a lever to do the new thing. They just haven't figured out how to. So this is actually pretty topical.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, some of the best change managers I've met are personal trainers.
So true. Yep.
Because, what we're talking about, like you said, it's not a campaign. It's not a moment in time. This is a sea change that has to be sustainable and, more or less forever from the moment it's implemented.
It's like from the health perspective, Colin, it's like, it's a lifestyle. It's not a diet. It's not a workout for 1 week and then, you're done. It's a lifestyle. You have to be sustainable long-term.
Right. So Tennille, like, what, if we want a crash course in how we can all be a little bit more like personal trainers in our professional environments, where do we start? I mean, you talked about creating a vision, a shared vision. What's next?
Yeah. Okay. So I could go a couple directions here. I could give our change, like what I would consider change management best practices that would apply here. Or I could also at this point just touch a little bit on like, what is change management? Why do we do it? What do you think would be more helpful right now?
Maybe we should go there. Maybe we should just talk go back to basics.
Okay, just very simply as to ground everybody, I know everyone's heard the term, but really what it is, change management, is it's really a risk mitigation strategy, right? So it's really a structured strategic approach to support people as they move from whatever the current state is, behaviors or pre-technology or whatever it is, to the desired state of the future. So if that's today when I'm overweight, to tomorrow I want to lose weight and go, be in a bathing suit, and that's my personal trainer that gets me on that journey. Great example, Colin. That might be that. So I say that because there are several approaches to change, as I'm sure some of you may be aware. There's all kinds of different approaches, and there's all kinds of different levers that we can be pulling from a change perspective. One of the most common, I think, especially in workplaces, and is really that compliance-based strategy, right? And to be honest, it's really, not only is that out of date, but it never really worked that well because it was born out of archaic management practices and factory floors from like 100 years ago is when that came into play. And we're all knowledge workers now, and not all of us, but a lot of us are in these roles. It's just a different world. So that doesn't work. And also
compliance-based being like, hey, here's the new set of rules, do it
you
this
go do
way.
this, command and control
else.
kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
That was maybe okay, again, almost 100 years ago on the, the automotive floor, but it doesn't work today. And here's a couple of reasons why, and then I'll dive into some of the reasons, the way that we do change now. When you do that command and control type of thing, you're basically telling people that they are less valuable and less intelligent than whoever is demanding the change. And so that, of course, makes you feel disrespected and resentful if you're on the other side. Not a good place to start. And then because of something that is called reactance, which basically says, as humans, one of our core human needs is autonomy, right? A feeling that we have some level of control in our lives. And so when someone demands that we do something, it just sucks our soul. It sucks the energy out of our sails, and it makes us want to almost act like toddlers in the sense of reacting and resisting it. Even if we were okay with the change, just the fact that someone tells us we have to, not a good look. So this is where we often see people demonstrate all kinds of the siloed behaviors that Uzair was talking about, other disguised ways of resisting change, because if they're not able to openly express how they feel about it, and they're not able to co-create with you, and they're being told what to do as adults, this is a very dangerous place to be. And this erodes trust, it erodes engagement, and it makes people not adopt the change. And here's one other little side note on it, and this would apply to the personal trainer example or in change in organizations. And that is, if you do that kind of compliance-based thing, you might get a little bit of compliance for a short term, like one thing, right? So somebody might log into the platform, right? You have a new SaaS platform, they might log in, they might do, here's entering a contact, whatever, but they're not going to do like the ongoing best practices, behaviors, and like having that ongoing motivation, just like with the gym example. You're not going to have that sustainable, meaningful, motivated long-term change, because it's a different kind of reinforcement. It's a different kind of motivation. It's intrinsic versus extrinsic. And so I say all that to say that that's what does not work. Okay. So what does work is outreach. At Outreach here, we have a very holistic approach to change, and it considers people's mindsets, it considers their behaviors, it considers that organizational environment around them, right? Because these are all factors that reinforce one way or the other the behaviors you want to see, behaviors you don't want to see, and how people feel about it while they're there. So I'll just quickly go through a couple of the tenets here, but essentially our methodology employs a little bit of the behavioral approach, right? So that focuses on carrots and sticks. So that could be like incentives and disincentives. So maybe I get a bonus if I do this change, or there's some sort of a disincentive over here for not doing it. We also bring in the humanistic approach, which focuses on that winning the hearts and minds part of it. So that's that compelling vision we talked about, the thing that gets people excited about it, of why we're doing this, and then everyone can rally behind that. There's two other pieces here. We also pull in the neo, what I call a neo behavioral approach, which really employs some of that choice architecture and nudges. So I won't go into too many details here, but there's a lot of really cool, sophisticated ways we can do this. So it's not an extra thing people have to do on top of their work, but we're actually architecting some of the choices, making things opt-in versus opt-out, or vice versa, for the choices that we would like them to make. And then the final piece here is what I would call kind of the human-centered agile approach, which involves, like I said earlier, that co-creation, that co-elevation. We're all working towards the same goal. We did the work up front to figure out from a design principles perspective what that is, and we're building it with people, not doing it to people. That's very important. And then kind of running experiments and iterating based on what the feedback we're hearing and things like that. So I'm going to pause there. That was a mouthful, but I wanted to show you kind of a juxtaposition of what doesn't work the old way and what does work, kind of the newer way we're approaching change.
I think when you were talking about compliance-based and factory workers, it reminds me of sales organizations in most companies that I know.
Mm-hmm.
It really does. They still is the baton holder, platoon commander approach of enabling and enforcing action.
Yep.
And it's not the more autonomous. I mean, I think it's evolving. And even if they say it's not, it is in some ways. Yeah. So how do you sort of enable real change and not just lip service and checklist?
Yes, great point. And I will tell you that, again, I told you guys that I do all of our client facing change work as well. About half of our clients, and they're usually the larger enterprises, they do come to us and, they'll purchase change management services. They say all on board, lip service to your point, but then when it push comes to shove and I explain to them the approach that we're going to take based on their company and based on the culture and based on what's going on, they're like, oh, well, no, people just listen to us. It's command and control. They're going to do what we say. We don't need all that extra stuff. And I'm like, yeah, you don't think you do, but you really do. And for a variety of reasons. So I end up having to go in there and have this discussion in the very beginning and really set that stage and tell them why that doesn't work, help them understand it, and then walk them through what we need to do instead. And, sometimes they still want to go their way first, but then they end up coming back and saying, oh, by the way, you were right. That didn't work. I need help. So there's a lot of ways we can do that, but a lot of it is just like showing them. I like to use data whenever I can, showing data and the real ROI that comes in of when we do it one way versus another way, as well as just like case studies. McKinsey's done a lot of work in this department. A lot of organizations have. So I find that that's very helpful.
Awesome.
To add to other resources, like if you're interested in just reading up on change management, Alexander mentioned John Cotter's 8-step model and the Accelerate book, which I'll drop a link to that book in the chat here in a minute. Any other resources you recommend besides, McKinsey has published works on this, Tennille?
Oh my gosh, I honestly can't. We're going to be here for about 4 hours if I had rattled everything off, but I would love to share some resources afterwards with the group if that works.
That sounds great. Yeah,
okay.
Thank you.
Awesome. So what we thought would be kind of cool is kind of along the best practices and sort of takeaways that we sort of kind of use the ABM example we started with and talk about how to enable some change, or at least things that we've seen, I think building on sort of what Tennille said earlier. So to me, I think alignment is the starting point of anything. And to get to alignment, you need to have common understanding. And to me, account-based marketing is one example where there's always that challenge. What is it? Who does what? What's the clear roles and responsibilities? What do we need to do? How do we make it stick? What is the benefit? What are the tools, right? What are we going to see? What's different?
Yeah. Why are we doing this? That's the number one question we have to answer. Not only why are we doing it, why do you want to do it with us, right?
Yeah. It's like, wow, I could see the intangible, showing them, wow, I can see this information.
Yep.
I didn't know I had access to that. Why isn't my sales team using it? Yes, exactly. That's the reason we are here, right? Yep. So showcasing what's possible and making it tangible makes it real.
Yep.
So bringing reality to a concept, super important at all levels. So this is not just CMO, CRO, but your sales and marketing managers and your ICs that are there need to understand what it is. Once you sort of have that and you're like, this makes sense. And I still get the whole thing of, well, let's do a pilot. That's my best. That's my favorite. Let's do a pilot. That means I'm not bought in. I just want to get it off my checklist. Let's do a pilot. Like pilot will show you this. And then I think another important thing here to make believers is what to expect when.
Yes.
Right. You can get some really quick wins early. But to see sustained change, it's going to take time, and here is what it looks like. So showcasing that. One of the things I love to do is connect them with others who've gone through that same process. Mm-hmm. Getting peers to sort of talk to them is amazing, right? So I'm sure you guys at Outreach have a lot of examples in your sales process. You connect them, but I think to me that's amazing process to go through, and I do that both in the CRO and CMO side.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to sell them, because it's kind of like if you haven't seen it yet, you haven't gone through it, you're seeing all the background, like you said, like the why, the what, whatever, and then you're seeing what success looks like, what to expect. And this whole theme of everything you just said, Uzair, which is so great, is like information, communication, transparency. Like we're sharing all this information so they know what to expect. And that hits on one of the number one things, because the number one reason people don't change is because they don't know what the future looks like. But if we can set all this up pretty well and give them a very good idea of what it's going to look, feel, smell, taste like, etc., that makes it a lot easier to do it.
100%. And then once they sort of are there, then I think there needs to be a commitment of this is the way.
Yeah.
Right. I think the places where you have pilots or initiatives or campaigns, those struggle because they're all transient, they're all temporary.
And no one's owning that. That's the other part. You have to have that visible leader or leaders who are owning it going forward. And even if you don't want to take the carrot and stick approach and be holding people accountable, you can do it or not. Even if you don't do that, I have another client who has the opposite culture. It's very peer-to-peer led, and that doesn't work there. And we can't do command and control. We can't do all those things. And what we are doing there is very much peer-to-peer sharing stories. What we do there is leaders actually, instead of doing all this upfront work of reinforcing it, they're actually doing the after work. It's like, oh, I'm retweeting this success story. I'm celebrating that person, but they're not doing that upfront command and control push down work. So it's really interesting the way that you can approach these things.
Yeah, no, so that's perfect to this, which is, to me, it's communicate and communicate often at all levels, right? Yeah. This is not just starts with the top. That's where the belief happens.
Yeah.
You sort of roll it out. And my best examples of change are, hey, I did training. I did 2 Zoom sessions. I did a workshop. That's the best.
I got an email. That's it.
I bought the change management best practice from Outreach. I did these 2 things. It's done. It's over. I can move on now. Yeah. So the checklist approach of accomplishment in enterprises is amazing, right? It's sort of, again, back to your personal trainer approach. Until you own it, until you embrace it, you're doing yourself a disservice. So, we had sort of sales manager check-ins. I love sales stories. Nothing more powerful than sales stories, organic sales stories. I did this. I just learned, I was using Demandbase, and I found out this about this account, and I did this, and this happened. Oh my God. I've been trying to get into this account for the last 6 months, and because of this, I was able to get an appointment. Holy shit, amazing, right? So use that, use your office hours, use peer group check-ins and meetups, use managers to talk to each other. That's how you sort of are building a community around the change.
Yeah.
Right. So, but communication and touching and touching often and talking about this often is the only way you're going to embrace it. And that sort of leads to the next point of, man, it takes work. It's hard work. It's a marathon. It really is. And people joke around. And I think that when the first time Tennille and Colin and I talked, I said, I used to be at Deloitte, and I was a complete non-believer 25 years ago in change management. Complete. I thought change management was a bunch of touchy-feely BS. You kind of just went in, people talked about some frameworky stuff, and you moved on. And it's insane that you see it in practice now, how important it is and how hard it is to do, because there are so many points of failure.
Yeah. As
you talked about risk management, there are so many points that if you don't think it through, you're going to do a little bit and you're going to only get partial results. But if you really are committed, you have to have a sustained focus to change management.
It's really, I honestly think about it. You're so right, first of all. And I think about it almost like if you were doing like a recipe, like think about your favorite soup or your favorite dish of some sort. Let's say there's like 10 ingredients, right? You kind of need all 10, some level of all 10 of those things. And to that point, if you leave one out, it's too salty over here. If you leave this out, it's too watery over, like, so that sort of thing. You need to be doing all of them. And the hard part is it is work. This is my biggest pet peeve. Everyone says, oh, we need change management. We need it. Like they know they need it. They know it's a buzzword. But they think it's a Band-Aid. It's like a box tick, right? Oh, we brought the change management person in. Okay, it's done. No, it's not done. Leaders, you have to own this. You have to walk the walk. And there's so much work behind the scenes. And I think it's one of the big myths that change management is easy and touchy-feely.
That's why your title is change management, not change doer. Everybody else has to actually do the work.
Sir. Great call.
Yep. Someone's got to manage it.
I think the other thing that I want to bring up that I think we've talked about previously when we were prepping for this is failure will happen as you go along. Not everything is going to go as planned, and there everything from the Joe salesperson saying, oh, I went and got this lead and this person is no longer there. Like, okay, is that different than you've gotten a lead from somewhere else and that person was no longer there? What would you do otherwise? Right? Or there's this notion of when something we are going to do that the company is sponsoring or the leaders are sponsoring, that it's going to be perfection from the get-go. And guess what? It's not.
That's a form of resistance, I think. It's like, well, think about some excuses, right? It's just a form of, I don't want to do it, or I'm afraid to do it, or I don't know how to do it.
Exactly. So I think there is it's partly insecurity, it's sort of weakness, not admitting that you want to embrace the change. But I think that's the key part is being able to talk through that.
Yes.
And be there as a support system for those people, because they exist regardless of what you do.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to do that. And one of the best ways to do it is to have positive outweigh the negative, right? Embrace those amazing sales stories, because there are so many insane ones, right? Incorporate that sort of people are like, I want to be like that.
Yeah. And that's I love that you brought that up, because that's a good pull strategy versus push. Remember we said earlier, the command and control doesn't work. A lot of change approaches are push like that. Like, you're doing this. I'm trying to attract you the benefits, but it's not working. And when you do that, sharing success stories and kind of let people find the change and think that they're choosing it, it's a wonderful pull strategy.
Speaking of stories, could I ask either of you to share in brief a story of, maybe an organization where sales and marketing were not aligned, and how you worked with them to, whether it's an ABM adoption, change management initiative or not. But two revenue organizations not aligned, how you work with them to fix that gap.
Yeah, I'll do it.
I was gonna say, do you want to go? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to. Yeah, we worked with one which was amazing marketing team, amazing sales team, but they were two teams. They were not a single connected team. And we did some stuff, and we initially started with some very awesome, high-powered sales reps as a pilot. And those sales reps, some did well, others were like, I'm too good for this. I know how to do it well. Then we flipped to groups and offices. So we actually found 3 offices or 4 offices that kind of had managers bought in, everyone bought in, and then we sort of added some competition. And so now it was offices competing against each other. And then we had common leaderboards. We had contests every week for if someone did something based on timing or whatever else, they got certain rewards and they got spotlighted and so on and so forth. That was phenomenal. And then,
so this is like the Boston office and the New York office both have revenue targets to hit.
Yep.
And there's some kind of skin in the game, some kind of reward or just bragging rights if Boston office wins. But it takes both marketing and sales to work together to hit the goal. Is that the idea?
And use the new processes and the new tools we rolled out. You have to use it. And so then we were literally seeing, as soon as we started doing ABM in this case, that people who had target accounts that we had started to warm up before the classes started were starting to get appointments like crazy, people who were using the tool. And that to show that they were seeing appointments and opportunities. And then we had like in the check-ins we were doing with managers, they're like, holy shit, I've been trying to get into this account for 6 months and I got a meeting with the CMO. That gold. Then everyone's like, okay, well, how do I do this? What do I do? Like, the Me Too strategy is awesome. We want to be more successful like others who have success. Yep. And so the naysayers sort of kind of go on the wayside, and then people who are like adapting or just want to be successful. That's why you guys are awesome as a platform, right? You enable that success to happen. So I think to me, that is one of the coolest examples of, being able to, when we started going with the top sales guys, probably was a bad approach because they think they're God's gift and they know how to do it, right? Versus people, when you did it in groups, had a mentality of winning as a team, and it made the change stick more.
I love that, because you're actually bringing in Cialdini's principle of social proof. And so I think that that's great, because you're bringing in the relatedness piece, and also they're learning from each other, and the competition piece. There's lots of different psychological things happening in that one.
Cool. I'm going to use that, Cialdini. I got smarter today, so I'm going to use that term.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a resource, Colin. Add to the list. Cialdini's book. I think it's The Power of Persuasion. 7 Principles.
Googling it now.
Yeah, it's he's been around for 25 years, but it's insane. And honestly, I'm pretty sure most sales and marketing people have seen this book because it's amazingly impactful.
Yeah, I hope so. It's great.
Mm-hmm.
But I think just because salespeople are competitive, gamification and important recognition, works beautifully. Right. So use that, mix it up, change it up, and sustain it. So I think those are, hopefully some cool ways to kind of think about bringing it all together.
All right. I got busy there Googling these books for a second. Tennille, I'm sorry. Did you want to share like a story as well of a transformation? Maybe two teams that weren't aligned, or a different type of transformation you could share.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to rack my brain because I've been on so many projects lately. I think I would say maybe not one story, but I would say some of the things that I feel like I've seen are kind of like big needle movers. We already mentioned a lot of them. Like I said, the compelling vision, the gamification is awesome. I feel like the two are the biggest ones. I feel like the co-creation, which I've mentioned 1,000 times, but I just can't stress that enough. And so what that looks like, for example, at Outreach is when we are starting a project up, right? So we bring in managers as well as some of the future end users into the early change discovery discussions. So we're kind of setting the stage and saying, hey, by the way, this is what we're planning to do. This is how your life and your people's life will change day to day. This is what this looks like really making it clear for people. And it's kind of taking some of that fear out of it. And we want you to give us feedback. What's not going to work? What's a point of friction you anticipate? What's great about it? Do you see the benefits? Like, so getting all those change discussions, really bringing folks in as early as possible and surfacing any of that resistance or feedback or friction that they anticipate early on, and then actually proactively addressing it as we roll it out. So I think that it's just one of the most powerful tools I've seen, as well as ongoing feedback mechanisms. And we didn't quite touch on that, but that's one of the most important things too. If you think of like an agile methodology in the sense of whether it's a SaaS platform or any change, you want to be like testing it out, experimenting and being iterative real time based on what you're hearing with people, because that way change is being done with them, not to them. And that's really important.
Love it. By the way, your mention of the early stage involvement discovery conversations brings us to a question from Shawanda Roberts. Thank you for this question, Shawanda. They're saying that they're at a firm that has never had a good sales and marketing integration or alignment, and they're now tasked with filling that role. Have a lot of sales experience, not a lot of marketing experience. Actually, they say they know nothing about marketing, which I don't think you know something, but they're at this point, so they want to make sure they're asking the right questions and starting to make some good suggestions. So, in a situation like that, what are the discovery questions? What are the first places to try to dig in? That's a question for either of you.
Is she saying that is the questioner saying that they're on the sales team and they don't know anything about marketing and they need to work together? Is that what the question is?
They are now in a role where they're responsible for sales and marketing integration. That's what they're saying. Okay.
So they're the leader essentially of both teams?
Let's go with that.
I guess, yeah, you don't know all the, okay. I'll just throw my 2 cents in, and then Eric, of course, please dive in. I guess my gut would tell me, they're the leader, so that's great, right? But they would probably need to come up with a compelling vision. So whether that includes, I don't know if that includes metrics or data in any sense of the word, but essentially finding out like, why do we need the teams to work together? What benefit are we all going to see when that happens? What are we trying to do together? Where are we going to be going? And how do we need each other to get there? I would start thinking through some of those questions.
Yeah, I would agree.
Shawanda clarified, by the way, not a team leader, but in a role that has been tasked and working in conjunction with the marketing team. So like a bridge role. Oh, so he or she needs to collaborate with the marketing team. Is that correct? Yep. Co-elevation. Yep. Like a liaison, yeah. Yeah, they need to figure out, and again, I'm not in your role, but I guess what I would do if I was in your shoes is find out from maybe your leader or the leader of those 2 teams or whoever you need to get it elevated. You need to get it up as high as possible and find out what we're trying to do, why we're doing it, and then bring them into your team. This is where that team term comes in. It's not just, this is my sales team. Your team is people outside of your immediate team, right? It's almost like your family can be human family. Like you need to think broader and like, who do I need to get on my team to achieve our goals together? So we're co-elevating each other to achieve our goals.
Yeah, I almost say you have to know the outcome. Start with the outcome. What is the outcome that you're trying to drive to? Then define what needs to happen, and what needs to happen is in what are the different steps that need to happen, and then define who's best equipped to do it. And then that's the squad, right? truly the squad, and then it's that's what I'm saying. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. It's the
A
growth.
great book.
Yeah, it's a growth squad. And so I think the first thing is throw away the sales and marketing label to a growth label. And you throw away your own metrics and your own milestones to a common set of dashboards and KPIs that you're both measuring to the same outcome. Because then there's 100% alignment. It's sort of, you're seeing stuff happen to the left, inform what's happening to the right, what's happening on the right, inform what's happening on the left. Because and we didn't spend a lot of time talking about ABM, but one of the core principles of ABM is driving unified conversations for accounts. X teams. I like the X teams approach. I think it's cool.
Somebody asked me to show it again. So the links in the chat too. All of the links all the resources we've talked about today are in the chat. I could stay and talk about this for hours. Maybe we'll have to do a part 2. I don't know, like a 201. So here's where I want to end. We can continue this conversation in the forums. This isn't it, right? So we're going to share the recording. We will share the deck. We'll try to find a way to share all the resources that were listed today too, because I had a few asks for that. And Tess just dropped in the chat. There's already a discussion started there. So if you want to ask more questions, I might be able to. Uzair sounds like he's got a busy week with a board meeting, but I might be able to rope him in to answering a couple more questions with Tennille there later. So share your experiences, ask your questions, continue to connect with each other there. That's what we're for. And I want to end with this, which is that I think, what brings sales hackers together, after I've been doing this for 3.5 years and talked to a lot of you, is that you feel like you're trying to drive a change. Maybe you wouldn't describe it that way, but you may feel like the black sheep, like you're the only person in your org that, quote, gets it, or you just hate your process or your boss because they're stuck in the old way of doing things. So if that's what brings you here, then you should think of yourself as a leader. Even if you don't have a team, you're a change agent. You are a change agent. In any role, you can be a change agent. Even if you're just an SDR and you want to change the way subject lines work in your cold outbound, you can do that. Study change management, read up on it. You don't need an MBA, but apparently listening to Uzair and Tennille, it helps. So anyway, thanks so much for being here. Really appreciate you all showing up, being engaged, giving us your time. If you have feedback for me on how we can make these even better in the future, or you just want to connect and chat, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. And a special thanks to Uzair Dada from Iron Horse. Check them out if you want help with sales marketing, alignment, ABM initiatives. They are definitely the people to talk to. And thanks to you, Tennille, for being here and talking to us about how outreach leads change too.
Thank you for having us.
It was fun.
Our pleasure. We'll talk soon, I'm sure. Take care, everybody.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.